So that's kind of the way that you want to write about talents or interests that you have, so that the focus is less on bragging about yourself and more on explaining your growth over time as a result of interesting experiences you've had. As for the background or identity part, I've seen students write really compelling essays about their background or their identity. But the most compelling essays that I see are when students are writing about how their identity, or they're writing about how their identity exists at the intersection of two different cultures or groups or something like that. So I worked with a student who wrote a really wonderful essay about how they were a first generation Indian American student, and they couldn't appreciate their parents' culture when they were younger. They felt uncomfortable at parties that their parents took them to where people were dressed in traditional Indian garb. They found that the conversation about India was foreign to them. They'd never been there and they didn't understand it. And they, they felt out of place, and they resented their parents for taking them to these boring parties. And they really just liked mostly aspects of American culture. But then they read a book where there was a character whose father passes away, and he's an Indian character, and his father passes away, and he realizes that he spent his whole life distancing himself from his father just because he felt like his Indian identity and his American identity couldn't coexist. And finally, only as his father's dying does he realize what a silly thought this was. You know, I don't need to be either Indian or American. I can be both. My identity consists of components of both cultures. So then, you know, the student took sort of that moral and tried to apply it to his own life. And he started making resolutions to, you know, cook more with his parents and bond with them. And this turned into a really awesome essay where the student investigated this, what started as a tension in his own identity. And then he manages to reconcile this tension and embrace the complexity of who he is. So essays about a background or an identity are usually stronger when there's some sort of tension in the student's identity or in their identification with a culture or a background. And then you actually watch them kind of working through that tension and working to embrace the complexity of their own background and their own culture. Those essays, I've read a few of essays like that have been really great. So I think that's probably all I have to say about the first prompt.